Hello, hello. It's the Japan Zoomina from a very, very wet and stormy San Diego on February 6, 2024, which I hear is a very cold and snowy February 7th, 2024 in Japan. Ohayo gozaimasu to all of you who are joining us from Japan. I'm Ulrike Schede, a professor and director of the Japan Forum for Innovation and Technology here at UC San Diego at the School of Global Policy and Strategy. That's GPS. If you haven't heard of GPS, there's a lot to learn. You can find out more about us at gps.ucsd.edu, including that we have a degree that is a Master of International Affairs with a Japan specialization. And at our school, we have JFIT, the Japan Forum for Innovation and Technology, where we do a lot of fun things. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter and on our website, jfit.ucsd.edu. This is the Japan Zoomina. If you're a first-time participant, let me explain. Our events are recorded. That means you are not visible on the screen, but feel free by all means to type any questions you might have into the Q&A box. I will refer to you only by your first name to protect your privacy. And the recordings are all in what we call our JZ gallery. You can find links to past events at jfit.ucsd.edu/Zoominar. We do this every 2 weeks. Today, of course, we have Taka Kiyoizumi, who I will introduce in just a moment. Oh, it's not a tentative title. I didn't change it. Sorry, Taka. But the important part on the slide is February 20th, we'll have Anne Vandenbel, who is at the Capital Group, and she's going to talk about Japan at an inflection point, the ups and downs of Japan's economic and investing landscape. So we're going to talk macroeconomics, followed by Peter Gruss, who used to be the president of OIS, the Okinawa Institute for Science and Technology. We'll talk about R&D funding and university education in Japan and how that connects to innovation. And on March 19th, we have Albert Chu, who works at the Digital Lab of Sompo, and he'll talk about aging and the future of insurance. So make sure you join us and look us up on JFIT. I just got back from Tokyo, and it actually kind of looks like these days like this. Winter is, of course, always great there. But let me stop my share and introduce Taka. Here he is. Hello, Taka. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Good morning.
Yeah, Taka, Dr. Takashi Kiyoizumi, goes by Taka, is originally hails from Japan. He is a Keio University trained physician and practiced at the Yokosuka, I want to say Navy base, is that right? Okay, yes. Where and from there he kind of found his way to the United States, practiced medicine here, but thought that more could be done. I got an MBA from MIT and started his own company, which was quite successful, and then moved to San Diego, or while he had the company, was in San Diego, and is now an angel investor in the life science and health sciences innovation ecosystem in San Diego. We'll talk a little bit about biotech in San Diego because San Diego is actually the third largest biotech hub in the United States. Some people may not know this. So Taka, in his spare time, is also the executive manager of JFIT. He is my right hand, so to speak, and in charge of running our educational offerings for entrepreneurship, and especially for Japanese entrepreneurs in the health sciences who come to San Diego for immersion programs. So Taka, thank you for everything you've done and are doing for JFIT, and it's really great to have you on board here and on my team, and or we are the team actually. And the reason I wanted you here today is that for the last 2 sessions, we've heard journalists and academics talk about innovation in Japan. And it was very learned and highly informed, but not everything I heard seemed to match what you're telling me from the ground, that there is actually an applied version of all of this, the angel investor version of what's going on in the health sciences in Japan, and also the connection between Japan and San Diego in the life sciences. So thank you for joining me today, as we want to shed some light on what the actual business reality looks like after we've heard from the scholars. So welcome, Taka.
Thank you. Sounds good. Yes, as Professor Shede said, last two Japan seminar was, of course, in entrepreneurship in general for the society and some of the historical point of view, including, Eiichi Shibusawa, kind of a huge figure. But the healthcare is, it's of course the part of society and the community, but, people think of healthcare as when you're sick. So when you're healthy, probably less of the thinking. But I would like to go over some of the continuing the series of historical point of view. So I will start with the historical contribution from Japan in healthcare in general, or life science so-called. Then I will move into more of the details, what's going on in Japan. And at the end, I like to compare somewhat what I experienced in San Diego, especially for the startup or entrepreneurship arena versus Japan, because I, as Professor Sheda said, I help Japanese entrepreneurs as well at the same time. So let me start sharing my slide and start the discussions. See. Can you see this?
Yeah, that's
okay. Let's see the full screen here. Is it better?
Perfect.
Okay. So the first, let me just share some of the did you know kind of story in the life science from Japan. So it's a little bit of a historical, the timetable, but Shibusawa started his innovation and society innovation in the late 1800s. So I had to start in 1890 when Shibasaburo Kitasato of University of Tokyo at that time, and he was a founder, actually the founding dean of Keio Medical School as well later. He discovered the diphtheria antitoxin serum. Diphtheria is one of the infectious disease. Probably everybody received, or most of the people received the DPT vaccine when you were a child, diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. So diphtheria is one of them. And Kitasato did discover anti-serum is effective therapy for this diphtheria. And that led to immunology research and many vaccine development later today. So he's one of the kind of harbinger of the immunology. Now, the 1902, the vitamin B1 deficiency caused the disease called beriberi. It's mostly African disease, but actually, the many people had a heart failure because of the B1 deficiency. So the Suzuki Umetaro, of course, University of Tokyo, discovered that thiamine deficiency, basically B1 deficiency, caused that the disease. And basically supplementing the vitamin is a very, very effective cure. And he and the Sankyo's founder created that pharmaceutical company later on. So he's one of the founder of pharmaceutical industry in Japan, the modern pharmaceutical industry in Japan, and a significant contributor for the vitamin, the research. Now, jumping to the 1960s, the diltiazem, cardizem is the trade name here in the US, is first calcium channel blocker used for hypertension. And at that time, blocking calcium channel is kind of no-no in academia. If you block calcium, you will die. But the Tanabe Seiyaku continued the research and brought first the calcium channel blocker that at that time revolutionized hypertension therapy treatment. Now, 1970s, the leuprolide, still currently used for the management of prostate cancer. The Tulane University researchers, Professor Shari and Professor Arimura, developed the leuprolide, and Takeda licensed it. Takeda is still selling a prostate cancer drug. And Professor Shari later won the Nobel Prize for his discovery. 1970s, at the same time, the Sankyo, one of the modern, research R&D pharmaceutical company, was doing a research in cholesterol control, metabolism, and they discovered the first so-called statin. Probably you've heard of statin. Currently, I think a Lipitor is probably most famous one, and millions of people taking it. And the Sankyo is the first company discovered that mechanism, and they licensed the drug to Bristol Myers Squibb. And 83 is another the breaking point for dementia treatment. Aricept, probably you've heard, for the Alzheimer's treatment, discovered and developed by Eisai. And Eisai continued Alzheimer's research, and if you are in the healthcare field, you've noticed the new antibody developed by Eisai called Leqembi was approved last year. So it's another new stage for the Alzheimer treatment. 1988, Otsuka Pharma discovered and invented Abilify. That's an antipsychotic drug for psychosis, depression, anxiety, the treatment. And this is one of the, unfortunately, but fortunate for Otsuka, one of the most prescribed medication in the history. 1992, PD-1 and PD-1 inhibitor that universe created cancer immunotherapy, which is very big in this world. The biotech companies, so many biotech companies in the cancer immunotherapy field. Professor Tasuku Honjo of Kyoto University discovered this molecule and antibody, worked with Ono Pharma. And as probably you know, Dr. Honjo received the Nobel Prize in 2018 for his work. And medical device field, endoscopy, you get colonoscopy, gastroscopy, probably regularly when you are over 50 years old. And fiber endoscopes were, developed by Olympus, and Olympus still owns probably more than 90% share in this field. So this is a kind of, did you know story? Oh, I didn't know that, Lupron was discovered by Japanese investigator and so forth. But actually, Japanese life science community contributed quite a bit over more than 100 years. But just you didn't know most of the time. Okay, shall I move to the next slide? So next one. I did a Google search and found this data, 15 largest pharmaceutical companies in the world by sales. So as you see, where is Japan? And yes, you can see Takeda as number 11, right? That Japanese flag here. I don't know whether you can see it. So that's Takeda there. So what's going on in the field? As probably many of you know, if you are in finance industry, the pharmaceutical companies merged quite a bit, late 90s, 2000s, continued, and especially US companies, multinationals. For example, Pfizer acquired Upjohn, Sorrel, and American Home Products, Warner Lambert. They became larger and larger. And Japanese industry is a little bit slow in terms of consolidation or the merger among companies. Excuse me. So I looked at for example, top 5 Japanese companies and the total of the sales for top 5. Then it became 68 billion, which will put the probably number 2 place. So Japanese companies are still, independent, many independent, but actually the contribution or sale of the drugs are very significant, very significant. So
Hey, Taka,
that's.
could I just interrupt you here for a second, if I may?
Of course.
Be
Yes.
my German self. I mean, this is revenues, right? So I'm wondering, this is not profits or number of drugs or anything, just dollars. And so dollars are always complicated, especially with the current exchange rate and whatnot. But I note there's no German company, which surprises me, and only one Swiss company, no, 2, sorry, my mistake. No French, or maybe one German French or something like that. But I'm wondering whether this is also an expression of the fact that drugs are so much more expensive in the United States. Or put this question differently, do these drug companies have a home market advantage? That is one of the reasons that the Americans are big, is that there's lots of prescriptions in the United States and drug prices are very high. And maybe the Japanese makers have more prescriptions in Japan, and then drug prices are not allowed to be high or something. Is there an explanation like that going on here, maybe?
Yes. Probably, as you mentioned, Japanese pharmaceutical pricing is different. Government controlled to a certain extent. Of course, pharmaceutical companies negotiate pricing with the government, but it's a national health insurance system, and the drug prices are set by so-called agreement. For example, the Opdivo, you remember the slide, one slide before, that's the new cancer immunotherapy agent. For example, the price was cut in half because of a lot of use, and of course the source of healthcare, healthcare war chest is limited, and cannot take more than the big share in that one drug. So the price, I wouldn't say price control, but price adjustment affects the pharmaceutical industry in Japan as well. Okay. Right. May I move to the next? So kind of this is the overall picture of what's going on in Japan and what Japan has brought to the world. Then let's go into more of a micro into macroscopic view of what's going on in innovation in the world. So in San Diego, there are Japanese companies operating, mostly doing research, because the San Diego is such the brain chest in terms of the biomedical research, and also the home for the large global pharma too. So Japanese companies are here: Takeda, Kyowa Kirin, Ajinomoto Biopharma, Nitto Biopharma, Nakara Automation, but also Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, Bristol Myers Squibb, GlaxoSmithKline, Eli Lilly. Basically, half of the top 12 companies are here, in doing especially the research operation. So San Diego is very active, and this is only a big farmers, and the lot of biotech companies the private biotech companies in San Diego is probably 400 to 500 today. So there's a lot of activities here. So that also attracts collaboration opportunities between these companies. So that's San Diego kind of landscape in the pharmaceutical.
Not to mention UC San Diego's important role in creating.
That's right.
And students that actually then would rather stay here than move elsewhere, right?
Exactly.
So what is the situation like on the Japanese startup side? That's
yes. So Japanese startups, let's move on to that aspect. So in general, life science startup, deep tech startup, three components are very important. Technology, intellectual properties, patent rights, and secondary funding, of course, and thirdly, the management. So all the days, I think technology was most valued, especially academic research. But in reality, as companies started and tried to bring a project into the world, funding management plays, as significant, if not more, the role for the success. So let's going on what's in Japan in particular. So technology part. Japan, of course, looking up to the US, environment and try to take the good part, incorporate into Japanese system. So technology and IPs. So over a decade, they established TLOs, that is Technology Licensing Office. So there are 32 in Japan right now. And the 32 seems to be small, but actually they are efficient. Even one TLO takes care of 3-4 universities in the region, and sometimes including a research institute. So one TLO can hold multiple academic technology flow. And because of that, the flow from academia to industry startup are getting much more efficient. In the past, when I was practicing medicine in Tokyo, pharmaceutical company has to go to each university and each doctor's department or research department to try to license or collaborate. But now the TLO can handle multiple universities. So the efficiency is up in especially past decade. And the funding is also very important for any business. And the funding capacity is also getting up, especially in the past 5 years. So venture capitalist plays critical role in general in US and Japan too. But the Japanese VCs fund size are much smaller. So Japanese government stepped in and created AMED. AMED stands for Agency for Medical Research and Development. And the agency consolidates all the grant administration. Previous to AMED, the research grant, especially research grant, were administered by Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health and Welfare, and the Ministry of Economy, Trade, Industry, METI. So they had this 3 separate grant funding and management. Now they combined into one in AMED, especially for the life science grant administration.
So they're basically Japan's NIH?
And it's a little more than that. So in the US, NIH is, of course, budget-wise, NIH budget is larger, but also there's a National Science Foundation, and the DoD, Department of Defense, has a DARPA grant and a DTRA grant. But AMED containing all of those, like as if all of life science aspect grants are combined. So it's in organization-wise, it's probably more efficient than US. US startup companies have to file NIH grant, NSF grant, and so forth. So in that case, it's one-stop shop for the startup companies and academia too. And they started a new grant system called ecosystem grants. So that's the answer to especially growth, funding, growth capital funding. So startup companies, many times, even in the US, needs maybe $500,000 to $1 million to start to shape the company. That's enough. Then step up to Series A or Series B, $5 million financing and $10 million financing. But in Japan, startup funding is quite okay. The Japanese VCs can invest in $500,000, $1 million to start the company. But beyond that, say 5 million stage to 10 million stage, for example, the drug development going into clinical trials, that's expensive. And that's the capital Japan needs. So AMED came out with a new grant last year called Ecosystem Grant. AMED asks VC and startup companies, they may have started the company with VC's funding money. Then beyond that, as long as VC commits at least $10 million, AMED will match 2. So if it's 10 million VC commitment, AMED will match $20 million.
So that 2x of the VC investment?
That's right, 2x.
At stage B and higher, or?
It's a basically project basis. So as long as you have to apply with the project. One of the company I know is a Kyoto-based startup. They have a clinical program. It's called the BTB Therapeutics clinical programs already in phase 1 in Japan. But going into phase 2, it's very expensive. Probably $20 million, $30 million effort. So going to VC is one, but the Japanese VC itself doesn't have enough dry powder most of the time. So AMED, knowing the opportunity, can go forward without slowing down. They implemented this new system, and the VCs also need to be certified. So not anybody, but the certified VCs. So I would say a dozen or so largest VCs are certified, so they can bring their so-called portfolio company into this grant, so that they can accelerate the project development.
Could I just so this is very important. We want to talk about management, but let me just stay here for a moment. So there's a lot of talk about large Japanese companies not being sufficiently involved with the startups and the innovation ecosystem in Japan. And so there are these numbers floating around, right? That the 80% of Japanese exits are IPOs and only 20% are M&As. We know that in the life sciences, the M&A exit is particularly important, precisely because the whole drug approval process is so expensive. And so it's unlikely that a small firm, we actually already have a question from the audience on this, right? So can small firms ever get through to these large guys, break through their barriers? And so usually what we see in the United States is that a lot of the startups just basically sell out to the large firms who then fund the whole FDA approval process, right? How does that look like in Japan? Is this ecosystem grant a way to empower small firms to get through the FDA approval equivalent, or is there still the large firm at the end that will then buy the small firm and take over the drug?
Yes, and the large pharma, of course, the target for the potential acquirer. And as you mentioned, the IPO market is so abysmal, even in the US right now. In Japan, it's much less of the opportunity. So M&A would be the exit for the investors. And of course, pharmaceutical companies, looking for all the opportunities, wherever in the world, globally. So when good, program, arises from Japan, yes, they will acquire. But in general, when they look into Japanese opportunities, in the past was too early. They started with $1 million, $2 million. That's still project plus. It's not the corporation, the clinical program yet. But the ecosystem grant can boost those projects into clinical so that the large pharmaceutical companies can compare Japanese opportunities and the US opportunities kind of same the platform. So that's the next stage. So in order to prepare Japanese startup projects or programs attractive enough or advanced enough for the pharmaceutical companies to take over. So I think this is that kind of mezzanine step for that. And also, the second one, international VCs, they noticed, yes, if Japanese programs or companies get enough funding and enough, I will go into management, enough management, team in place, they can be as good as any US biotech opportunities. So some of the larger funds are quite actively looking into Japanese opportunities as well.
Yeah, I just saw the data that, there's this kind of impression that Japanese VC investments are small sized. And so Japanese VC do this bara investment, right? So they have lots of little projects and don't really create milestones and don't educate or nurture their portfolio companies. But I saw recent data that the average VC investment in Japan now is $3 million, which compared to Silicon Valley may sound really small, but I looked at I'm thinking about the absolute number, and I think if I were a startup company and somebody gave me $3 million, that's actually a nice amount of money. I can do plenty with that in the initial launch, right? So it seems as if the Japanese VC industry is a little bit normalizing, and it's getting much more. It's so it's 3 million on average. I don't actually know what the tails are of that, but it sounds to me that that's a pretty good number.
That's true. That's true. But that's the kind of seed to early Series A level. Right. But as company advances, we need Series B, later stage investment, which requires $10 to $20 million in life science usually. So that's the hurdle right now we still have. The initial funding is getting better and better. That's for sure. And so what I hear from Japanese VCs, they have enough money for the seed funding, initial funding, but they invested them all kind of thing. So they are running out of seed funding opportunities, but they cannot really step up to Series A and B. So that's the little bit of struggle. But this AMED grant, with that, the VCs can step up to Series A, Series B level of the funding because of the matching portion.
So is there a reason why they only have like 15 VC allowed to do this, or put differently, could a foreign fund go to Japan and get this AMED ecosystem grant?
I think the reason is because it's a taxpayer's money. So that's a little bit of a hurdle. However, the international VCs, American, US VCs started the funding, kind of subsidiary funding on the other hand, in Japan. So kind of partner fund in Japan, and they get certified. For example, Fidelity has a large group called F Prime as a US VC based on Boston, but they also invest in many parts of the world under the name of 8 Roads, number 8 Roads. So that's also a certified VC in Japan, and they have a Japanese office and the Japanese funded too. So they started doing that.
Great.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so move on to the management talent. Yes, this has been a challenge in the US too. Over 30 years, I've been in the industry. Initially when I started the biotech, job, most of the CEOs, like 30 years ago, were from mega pharma, retired mega pharma executive, were the CEO, and some of them try to run small startup like a mega company. So was not quite. Also, it's the culture fit wasn't quite there, but investors noticed, and over time we, because of the success of startup companies, for example, Genentech was small but hugely successful. Amgen successful. Biogen in Boston was super successful. So the people worked for those companies initially, as a really startup company. They became, very experienced startup or venture company executive, and they became the pool of executives for the venture capital partners. So that takes time, as you can imagine, that takes time, and Japan will need somewhat time, but one positive aspect is the job mobility is significantly up in Japan across the board, not only life science, but any jobs. So, and many people, when they change jobs, they seems to be attracted to the startup companies too. Of course, there's risk, but the reward is there. And especially IT field, many companies proven that, risk is there, but the reward is there. And so exciting to be a part of the small management team. So I think it's gonna look pretty good in probably 3 to 5 years. It's gonna be a big, huge difference from today. And the last point, information exchange networking. This is, I think, actually Japanese people are very good at, creating a community and share information. And one of the examples, LinkJ, we know they visited San Diego with Mitsui Fudosan as a sponsor, and they looked around the ecosystem here, and they immediately created even more efficient ecosystem in Tokyo. That's since 2016, they opened the LinkJ, and they now connect academia, investment community, and also startup communities in one. So they can network together, share opportunities together, and even these days they have affiliation with 10 organizations in 7 countries in the world, Europe and the US. So I think these are very good kind of soft infrastructure. And also Mitsui Fudosan is building a lot of incubation spaces in and surrounding Tokyo area. So the infrastructure, both hardware, software, it's getting better and better every day. And the JBA VC hosted events, so many events, CIC, which is large organization in Boston for the entrepreneurs. They opened a branch in Tokyo and hosting many events and accelerator kind of pitch events too.
Oh, thank you. So for full disclosure, we should also mention that both of us are actually supporters of LinkJ. And so that's actually a sign, right? So they come to San Diego and create the community and so forth. And that actually, Taka, puts you in a position to answer a question from the audience,
Okay.
which is, what's an average size startup? So if you look at the LinkJ member startup companies, or the startup companies you know or invest in Japan, what's an average size for those places? And you're an angel, of course, right? So that's a sort of a kind of a little bit of a different thing from a VC. But can you talk a little bit about what you see there?
In terms of number of people working on the
Number of
startup?
people, or what they,
Hmm.
the money they have, or give us a sense for what these startups look like.
Yeah, most of the life science, the technology coming from universities or academia. So usually professor is a scientific founder, and team up with business oriented people, usually one or two. And the investor can be, venture capital investor, can be the fractional, manager or fractional CFO. So 3-4 people are usually the case. Initial research is done in the university, but the company, because it's an independent company, will have a research contract with the university. So then when they get bigger, if they can, get funded, they will hire scientists their own, and they may move to an incubation space with wet lab. So that's the process. And usually it's probably $250,000 to $500,000. And that's the kind of start. But the very beginning, they have to come up with, first $10,000, $50,000 kind of situation of their own money. Then advance, and the outside investor will start to come in.
So the questions coming to Taka, you may want to stop your share maybe so that people can.
Yeah, I have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't
may answer some questions of funding because of the angel, angel investment here.
Let's go there.
Yeah. So opportunity, as I mentioned, US started coming to Japan too. So it could be the beginning of ecosystem, can be US ecosystem, Japan ecosystem, into Trans-Pacific ecosystem. That would be probably the future in 10 years or so. The funding, so especially the beginning of the seed stage, in the US, angel investors play a significant role. Of course, venture capitalists are important, but in the US, as you see in this table, $6 billion a year going into seed stage startup. So, and in Japan, the angel group doesn't exist. So government, that AMED, try to play a role, but it's very hard.
Could I just interrupt you? Yeah, I think it would be wrong to say that there are no angels. I mean, there is no angel group. Like, you're a member of New Fund, which is the what we used to be known as the West Coast
Tech Coast Angels, yeah.
Tech Coast Angels, sorry, Tech Coast Angels. So Japan doesn't have a group like that, but I personally know, we know people who are angels in Japan, right? So so the fact that there is no number there doesn't mean that that number is zero. I think that would be an important.
Yes, individual. So we call them super angels. Super angels. So those are the individuals. For example, Mikitani-san of Rakuten, invested, I believe, $20 million into San Diego biotech company in probably 7 years ago. Now it became a Rakuten Medical. Those super angels, yes, they do exist, but they are not accessible by any biotech or startups. Angel groups here, these seed stage angels, they are accessible. We have a website, anybody can apply, and not everybody can get the funding, but anybody can apply. We evaluate, opportunities and invest. So with COVID, it was tough time, but since everybody is on Zoom, we receive all the investment opportunities across the country. We used to limit it to the San Diego area, but now we invest in Boston company, Seattle company, Texas company, and so forth. And also another angel group I'm a member of called Bio-Pacific Investors. That group, the members are basically Trans-Pacific, Australian members, Taiwanese members, Korean members. So we evaluate investment opportunities across the Trans-Pacific area. So those are the major difference. Yes, there are super angels exist here too, right? Elon Musk could be a super angels, Gates, Bill Gates, super angels, but the angel I meant here is business angel groups.
I see. So we actually have a question from the audience. So if I wanted to, or if somebody wanted to get access to a super angel in Japan, would one have to go through these groups that you were just talking about, like LinkJ or something, or how would one find a super angel?
You have to know someone.
Yeah, that's Japan, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have to belong to, I don't know, the Roppongi Hills Club and hang out and try to find strike a conversation there.
Well, though I think that network also exists, right? You just said that Japan is very good at networking. So once you're in, then probably that is actually not nearly as daunting as it may sound. But it's not organized, and so we don't know. And so we get these stories about Japan not having any angel investors, but I don't think that that's necessarily true. It's just organized in a different way.
Yeah, there is a group starting. Some of the Japanese angel group person, that's starting, joined the new fund here, and he looked and learned, and he started his own angel group in Tokyo using his family money. So, but I think a few members joined his group.
So Takahita has a question. Are we done with the slide? I don't want to.
Yeah. The management, that's okay. USVC's more proactive involvement of implementing the new talent as venture partners, entrepreneur in residence. Those are the kind of group of people venture capitalists have within group. And they put those people in a fractional CXO, CEO, CFO, and so forth. So that's very proactive approach these days. Yeah, let me stop.
Takahita has a question about how this is going to grow further, right? So and would like to know, in addition to Next, which presumably is involved, which government agencies, not funding agency, but government agency will be key stakeholders in removing obstacles for startups, and in particular in the life sciences place, right? And promote university industry collaborations in the field of the life sciences.
I think one thing the Richard Katz were talking last week was tax reform. Like some of the tax reform could be helpful. Because angel groups, we invest in early stage. For example, one of the examples is if we invest a startup today, so 2014, and if the company successfully exit in, say, 2030, 6 years later, the capital gain is tax-free in the US. Whatsoever. If we invest $10,000 today, and in 2030, I received $100,000 return because it was successful. And for that, the capital gain was $90,000, it's tax-free. So you have to hold more than 5 years. That's the law. But that encourages, if you don't have to spend money within 5 years, we can invest and see how it does. So that's kind of tax benefit, and you can incorporate that into your portfolio management, your your own portfolio management. So that's one of the system. I think if Japan could implement, that might,
Yeah, so that's what I hear from the super
improve.
angels. I know that is
Right.
the biggest problem, right? That
Right.
there's an uncertainty over what that's going to
That's
look
right.
like. Yeah.
Right. Right. That's right. And also, I think most angels here would like to involve in a startup. Involve means help. Of course, financially help, you invest, but also operationally or scientifically, they are willing to give their hands. So that's quite, I think it's more of a cultural thing. But in Japan, I think people are in general kind. So I think that would work, would work well.
So you mentioned that there are some US-based VCs or angel groups that are looking at Japan now because it's growing, and there's, as we know from history, there are good innovations to be found in Japan. Mark wonders whether the opposite is also true. That is, J startups coming to the US to get angel or VC funding,
Mhm.
and what does that look like?
Yeah, that's I think that's a good good effort by Jetro, bring a J startup here to expose to the community here. But I think it's very important, those companies has to be here, if they really want to get investment. If you just visit, 2 weeks or a month and you are gone, I don't think investors will take it seriously. So that's the challenge. So
So there are now some people that we have also worked with here at JFIT, that Japanese that see this and think that there's an opportunity to create a land, not a launch pad so much, but a landing place for so that the Japanese startup can come here. There's a share house or some sort of organization that will allow them to settle in and open shop in California and then raise money here, right? So that's also a development that we're seeing.
yeah, those are the accelerator. They can apply for accelerator, and yes, that's possible. Yeah, that's possible.
So when you go to Japan to advise Japanese startups, what are some of the things that you tell them that they need to do more of?
Okay. The one thing is, because most of the life science startups are from academia, I go back to to the basics. In academia, it's very important. The research discovery or finding is like a first in the world. They need to do that to have a public publication, publish that. But in business setting, first in the world, not necessarily the best in the world. So we need to evaluate, assess why is that the meeting the needs right now. Better solution than this. People will pay for this. So that's the concept gap is still there. So I keep advising them. The technology is nice. You have a patent, you have publication, but does it translate into business on the helping people right there? So that's the most challenging message I need to deliver.
Yeah, and I think that's actually true even outside the life sciences, that there's a
Yes.
lot. So the startups that we see in Japan often talk about how to make the world a better place, or the wonderful things. And I think that's also one of the reasons why we don't hear enough about, or not that much about, angel investing in Japan, is that as you may know, flaunting, so showing off your wealth, is not something that is appreciated in Japan. If you're, you can tell really wealthy people by maybe the quality of the cloth of their coat or something, right? But they wouldn't just show it off. And angel investing in a way is showing off that you have personal money, if you're a super angel. And so I think we're that's a little bit maybe also on the part of the angels to not be too auspicious in their behaviors or something, right? But I think this whole idea about getting really rich is something that Japan is now waking up to, that it's okay to be rich, right? And it's actually fun to have a lot of money, and so, and risk and return and so forth. So Ari has a question that I think works well for our final question for today, which she invites you to they invite you to talk a little bit more about the benefits for future entrepreneurs. So this M&A exit, right, to many people looks like it's unfair, right? So the professor or the scientist develops a drug, and at the end of the day, the large company like Pfizer makes all the dollars, and what's left for the entrepreneur? And could you maybe get us a little bit more into the how can that possibly be fair?
Okay.
Why is this a good calculus? Why is this a good calculus?
Yeah, fairness is hard, right? Because if I think it's fair, but the other party thinks unfair. So the life science, especially the drug development, yes, if you have enough funding, you like to go through all the way and helping patients. But it's very hard. Not many company can do it because of the funding issues, the challenges. And so that the mega pharma or global pharma will take over because they have system, they have, assembly line, so to speak. They just go through the pipeline. So for that effort, but they still taking the risk because, phase 2 data is good, but they still have to run phase 3 with, say, 2,000 patients. And it fails. But that's the risk global pharma is taking. So I think everybody's taking risks. So M&A is not necessarily unfair. One of the companies I invested, I think we are almost time, but the company I invested 4 years ago was exited by M&A last summer. And that company's program was still preclinical, great animal data and, great toxicology data, but not in human yet. But the large company, mega pharma, took the opportunity, because they saw enough promise. And the exit value was $1 billion. So, and the 500 million came as a down payment, and the rest based on the milestone, if they finish phase 2, phase 3 approval. But mega pharma spending that money, but still see the opportunity, and they want to fill the pipeline. So I'm not sure. It's hard. Everything is negotiable, and there's no. I think I don't have any right answer.
That sounds like a large amount of money, and so everybody wins, right? So the inventor probably got more, and the angels got more returns than they could even dream for or hope for, and then the big pharma may win, and then eventually, if everything works out well, then society wins as well, because we got another great drug that helps us increase our longevity and the health of society.
The health. And the good thing here in San Diego is those original founders, I'm sure they will start another company and another company. That's how our ecosystem works, the positive kind of loop. Yeah, I think that's
So
what.
that would have been another of my questions, whether there are
Yeah.
serial entrepreneurs in Japan. And I know the answer is yes, because I know several. So alas, we're out of time. So thank you, Taka, for a great, you know, alternative view from the ground up, from the investing side. And that was super well done. Thank you very much. And audience, thank you very much. Don't miss, in 2 weeks from now, we're going to talk about the Japan's economy overall. We're going to walk away a little bit from innovation and that sort of thing, but we're going to talk about macroeconomics and what's going on in Japanese in Japan as an investment object. So join us in 2 weeks from now, and thank you, Taka Kiyoizumi. It was great to have you on the show, and everybody stay well until we meet again.